They can't see us, right?
Now they can't.
What?
Valerie Richardson's here.
Good.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Hello.
Yeah, see David. Yeah, can y'all hear or see me?
Yes, sir.
Can you stand back of me now? That's okay. Good. So, good. Okay.
All right.
Who else do we see?
See, Grover is here.
No, I mean, we're
Already. So you're not going.
Is this your second page?
You want that?
Is that ending this after this?
Yes, I'll start. Yes, and then when I finish, I'll go. Now we'll
I
hear.
don't know. Get down. Okay.
Hold on, some more.
That's Mark Tapscott.
Yeah, Mark Shepard.
All right, 1 o'clock.
Yeah. Like I said, you can get them out pretty quickly.
Yeah. All right. Do we have all of our speakers?
Kevin or Will you tell us when we should start? When I should start?
Yes, sir. Just about another minute.
If they could.
Give everybody time to get in.
Okay. They're gonna. Yep. It's just.
Okay. I think.
That's great.
All right, Jenny's here.
Perfect.
David.
Okay.
Ken.
Take care.
All right. Do you want to get started?
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Viguerie, I think we can get started. Can you hear and see okay?
I hear and see fine. Yes. All on the big screen, all I have is Will's name, but I don't see my name.
Yeah,
I mean,
fine.
my face.
You're fine. We can see
Yeah,
you.
Okay.
We see
Okay,
you.
good. The important one over there. Okay. All right. We'll start. I'm Richard Viguerie, chairman of conservativehq.com, feduppac.org, and American Target Advertising. American Target Advertising pioneered political direct mail in the 1960s and the 1970s, which for the first time allowed conservatives to go around the blockage of the media. We have 4 national conservative leaders today that will each speak for a few minutes. Then we'll take questions. I'll start, and then we'll hear from each of the speakers. All year long, conservatives have felt that this election was the whole ball game. We're convinced that if Democrats win the presidency and the Congress, they will change the laws, including election laws, so that Republicans will never, ever again win a national election, including the presidency and the House or the Senate. President Trump may or may not win re-election, and the Republicans may or may not hold on to the Senate. So Tuesday's election results and the Georgia runoff election in January will determine the fate of America. The election results will determine whether America moves to a one-party socialist country. If the Democrats win the White House and the Senate, they will pack the Supreme Court. It will make Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico states, giving the Democrats 4 more U.S. senators. They will give us massive tax increases. They will abolish the filibuster. They will make major changes in election laws, including national ballot harvesting, abolishing photo ID to vote, lower the voting age, allow voter registration on election day. They will censor and suppress opposing views like America has never seen. It's amazing that with the leadership of almost every major institution in America arrayed against the conservatives, the Republicans were basically able to battle the establishment to a tie. The massive establishment forces against the president and the GOP included entertainment, Hollywood, the mainstream media, big tech billionaires and their companies, academia, and unions. Also, the liberals raised at least 500% more money from 500% more donors in the last 2 years than conservatives and Republicans did. Act Blue, one liberal organization, has over 13 million people who've given them their credit card information to simplify donation to liberal candidates and causes. It is clear that the progressives, the socialists, have launched a civil war against America, our Constitution, and all who oppose them. The 2020 election was the opening battle for the future of America between the socialists and the Marxists, and those supporting traditional American values is now out in the open for all to see. And today, quite frankly, conservatives are outgunned. America needs to wake up and realize that we're in a civil war with the socialists, the Marxists, and liberty and freedom hangs in the balance. All right, now we'll go next to Jenny Beth Martin, co-founder of Tea Party Patriots and chairman of the Tea Party Patriots Citizens Fund, who's speaking to us today from Fulton County, Georgia, outside where they are counting votes. Jenny Beth?
Much, Richard, and thank you to the press for being here today. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of what we've got outside of Fulton County before I give you my statement.
Make America, oh yeah, showing us up.
So we've got people out here today. The 30,000-foot view is big tech and big media were wrong for years. They said Trump was bad. They said that Trump would lose in a big landslide. The results show without a doubt that big tech and big media don't understand our country and the people who are in it. The fact that the race is this close is a testament to the support the president has had all along. As a consequence of that, Tea Party Patriots Action and our supporters are working with allied groups such as Freedom Works and Heritage Action to ensure the integrity of this election. We believe every single legal vote should be counted. We believe that no illegal vote should be counted. Right now, we are helping organize events in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona to ensure the integrity of the ballot counting process. Big tech and big media they didn't just get the presidential race wrong. They told us Democrats would win the Senate. They told us that they would pick up 10 to 15 seats in the House. Right now, not a single Republican incumbent was defeated in the House. We did not take back the House, but we are poised to pick up a good number of seats, possibly as many as 10. Republicans are poised to keep control of the Senate, and at the state legislative level, Republicans did not lose a single They did not lose control of a single legislative chamber, and they may actually have gained control of 2 chambers. The Democrats spent an incredible amount of money. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on a few Senate races around the country, but liberals didn't buy it. They weren't buying it, and they don't buy it. You cannot turn South Carolina into a liberal state. Mike Bloomberg, George Soros, and all of their untold millions and millions of dollars did not buy their votes, because the American people know that the new Green Deal, the Green New Deal, won't work for us. We don't want our country to be a socialist country. We love freedom, and that's why we're standing out here today, and that's why we are going to continue standing to make sure that we protect the vote and that we do not allow this election to be stolen.
Thank you, Jenny Beth. Jenny Beth has to sign off at 1:30. So if you have questions for her, make them soon after the other speakers. She spoke to us this afternoon outside Fulton County, where they're counting the votes. From Ken Blackwell, who's a senior fellow for human rights and constitutional governance at the Family Research Council. Ken was a former Ohio Secretary of State.
Thank you, Richard. I'll pick up where Jenny Beth left off. Look, we have a lot riding on this election. and that all pivots on the integrity of the election. Throughout the course of this election, we've been concerned about a number of things. First, the chain of custody, two, verification processes that assure that the person who registers to vote is the person who they claim to be. And so verification has been an integral part of our vigilance throughout this election. Now, what we're most concerned about is transparency. And I would just say it was enlightening to me as I went through with my Bible study group this morning, a passage, a lesson from Matthew 10:16, where we're told to go forth as wise as serpents and as harmless as doves. It doesn't tell us to go into battle mindlessly, without critical thinking, or as people hell-bent on suicide. And so what we are engaging in now is what you just witnessed from Jenny Beth Martin. We're putting as many eyeballs on this process as possible. This is a classic clash between forces of darkness and forces of light. What we are told is that those who want to do evil love the darkness. And so we're making sure that we shine as much light, get as much transparency in this process as possible. If we don't, what hangs in the balance, as Richard said in his opening comment, is our constitutional republic, a constitutional republic for which, for 244 years, has been, the gold standard for the world to see.
Thank you, Ken. Now we'll hear from David Bozell. David is president of For America, conservatives media engine committed to making freedom go viral one click at a time. David?
Thanks, Richard. Thanks so much, everybody. First, I want to congratulate the campaign on what looks to be a record-breaking performance. Whether it's rallies, whether it's fundraising, whether it was their Get Out the Vote operation, none of that stuff happens in a vacuum. They had over 2 million employees and staff and volunteers. And it looks to be like he's going to break Barack Obama's 2008 voting totals, which if you had told me that on Tuesday morning, I would say that Donald Trump is a shoo-in for re-election. We do believe that Donald Trump did win this race. It's up now to the campaign to prove it. They have been very transparent and very correct on their count, almost to the number, in all manner of different states, where there's Texas, Iowa, Ohio, Florida, and they seem very confident about Arizona. But we've got a live ball, as everyone can see by their Twitter feeds. There are lawsuits being slung in both directions in a number of different states. So from our vantage point, a count does not count until it can be counted in a transparent and legal way. And we want the president to be granted what Al Gore was granted in 2000, which was a stopped count, and his team was granted full access to the count. It is a simple request in all fairness to everything involved, and it was given to Al Gore back in 2000, and Donald Trump deserves that same treatment in every single state that this election is being contested in. Nobody wants this country to heal more than conservatives. Nobody does. But America is supposed to be a gold standard of democracy, a gold standard of elections. But we can't hold that mantle anymore if half the country doesn't feel as if their vote counts properly, or if half the country feels as if a number of, quote, votes were counted illegally. So we need to have full access and full transparency to the count. Anything less would be a soiled election in which no one wins and everyone loses. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next, we'll hear from Grover Norquist, founder and president of Americans for Tax Reform and primary promoter of the Taxpayer Protection Pledge, signed by lawmakers who agree to oppose tax increases. Grover?
Sure. After this election, I want to talk about the state of the conservative movement, the Republican Party, the forces that want to move towards more freedom. How are we doing? Well, with this election, presidential race is still being debated, but the Republicans held the Senate. That means that there's not going to be a $4 trillion tax increase, which is what Biden wanted, even if he were granted the presidency, not an $11 trillion spending spree as Biden would like. It's not going to be, there's not going to be any court packing. There's not going to be an undoing of the filibuster. There's not going to be adding additional states willy-nilly to the US Senate. And so a lot of the entire left's agenda, which they had predicated on winning the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and as you saw, spent $90 million to not get the Senate seat in South Carolina and tens of millions of dollars on the other Senate seats that they didn't get. I just talked to one candidate, Republican, who won a House seat, $10 million from outside sources put into that race, targeting a handful of Republican House candidates. We picked up in the House, we held the Senate, we picked up both houses in New Hampshire. So New Hampshire is a completely Republican state, both houses and the governorship. We picked up the governorship in Montana for another trifecta, both houses of the governorship Republican. The Democrats didn't capture a single state legislative body. We gained Republican seats. And so as we look at the future going out, there's a Republican Party united in not wanting to raise taxes and opposing the spending sprees of the Democrats. In support of the president's successes on judges, spending restraint, and taxes, and a Democratic Party, which is, I guess, technically led by Biden, but for which the hard left is going to be terribly frustrated that none of their agenda will be able to get through a Republican Senate, and it certainly isn't going to be getting through the state legislative bodies either, and it's going to be increasingly difficult with a narrow House to get House members in reasonable districts to vote the AOC line. So if you had to decide which team you wanted to be on just on their chances of winning, the Republican Party and the conservative movement are in a much better place than we were even 4 years ago.
Thank you, Grover. I think it's clear you can see that conservatives, not only those who are speaking today, but conservatives at the national, state, and local level feel that this presidency has been the most conservative presidential administration in my lifetime, a very long time. So we're excited about what the future holds. And we'll open it up for questions now.
Go ahead.
All right. Hi, everybody. This is Will Haddon from Shirley McVicker Public Affairs. For questions, I'm going to ask you to use the raise your hand feature on the Zoom. And then once you do, I will ask you to unmute and then identify yourself, what outlet you're with, and then you may ask your question. All right, Noah Robertson, I'm unmuting you. Go ahead and identify yourself.
Noah Robertson here with the Christian Science Monitor. I work out of our DC offices. I'm not sure if this is just for the peanut gallery or if anyone who just has the thoughts on the issue, but I am wondering about if, as the situation seems at least somewhat likely at this point, Joe Biden wins the presidency, and we look toward 2024 as journalists are wont to do ahead of time. That's a big if, but are we thinking that, as some have rumored, the president is thinking about the 2024 campaign, that he would continue holding rallies to signal such, or would we get someone more outside? There's been talk of Tucker Carlson already being pushed to run. So just opening up and looking forward, what do we think on that?
Let me make a comment, then I'll open it up to anybody else that wants to comment. Remember that in about 10 minutes from now, Jenny Beth Martin has to leave us. So anybody who wants to ask Jenny Beth any questions, you've got just a few minutes here. I will say that I was invited. representing the Christian Science Monitor will remember who Godfrey Sperling was. He was dean of the Washington Correspondence, maybe here, who hosted once, twice, three times a week for decades a breakfast for the newsmakers. And I was invited to be his newsmaker Monday after the 1980 landslide election for Ronald Reagan. And his opening question, I'll never forget, was, Mr. Viguerie, where did this landslide for Ronald Reagan come? You picked up the U.S. Senate, major gains in the House and governor races, legislative races. Nobody saw this coming. How did it happen? I said, excuse me, Mr. Sperling, I can't tell you how many press conferences we called where you and your friends here didn't show up, how many press releases you ignored. We were a movement out there that just was trying to get attention. Everybody ignored us. And I think the same thing, you heard from Grover, all the wonderful things that Republicans accomplished in the election on Tuesday. Nobody in the media predicted that, saw that coming. You know, the conservative movement is alive and strong at the grassroots like I've never seen it, and I've seen it for 60 plus years. So anyway, anybody have a comment about the question?
Yeah, it's 24 is an interesting one to look at, but I think 22 is going to be also important. You posited if Biden ends up with the presidency with a narrow majority in the House and a Senate Republicans that can block anything he wants to do in terms of taxes and spending. So the D's in the House will have to vote for his left-wing agenda. The R's won't allow it to go through, but the suburban families will go, did you see all of the crazy spending these guys wanted, didn't get? They'll get scared. The Democrats in the House will have had to vote for crazy, but they don't get it. They don't get the benefit of whatever they were passing, so that their base isn't happy that they got something because it won't pass. And the Republicans will run and say, do you see how crazy these other senators are? You need to keep electing Republicans. I think 22 is a particularly difficult year for the Democrats because everyone's would be looking to Biden, assuming he gets the presidency, but he's got to make his left wing happy. The House is going to be voting on this loose Chamber of Commerce Democrats that maybe weren't, but they pretended to be, and it solidifies the Republicans in the Senate because all they have to do is say no to bad things. 22 is going to be a bad year, and I think that whatever, for the Ds, and whatever happens then, whoever gets the most credit for helping that happen would help themselves. I hadn't thought of President Trump running again, but whoever did the most to help take the House and the Senate is the guy who can run around and go, now I should be president too.
Yeah, I personally won't give any oxygen to even the speculation of 2024 or even 2022, although what Grover said is absolutely correct, because I think there are too many irregularities, too many clouds, too much darkness for us to move beyond November and December and the first part of January of next year. We're in a bare knuckle fight, and these states have now been pushed to what I termed in 2004 as the margin of litigation, and so there will in fact be this will be litigated. We have too much on the table for us to start thinking about next year's or 2 years or 5 years in terms of the Thanksgiving table. We, in fact, are in a battle for the integrity of our constitutional republic right now.
Yeah, I just to pick up on that, Noah, I look forward to the president's second inaugural rally in January 2021.
Good.
That's the rally I'm looking forward to.
Thank you.
All right.
Next question.
Valerie Richardson
From the Washington.
from the Washington Times has questions. So Valerie, I've asked you to unmute. If you could read it.
Yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate it. I had a question about the spending that Mr. Viguerie referred to, and several others did as well. I mean, we saw Democrats spend in this election, according to Open Secrets, nearly $7 billion compared to less than $4 billion for Republicans. I mean, the discrepancy is huge. And yet it didn't, and aside from the presidential race where you saw Biden outspend Trump pretty close to 2-to-1, you've you had Republicans in the House pick up 5 seats. It looks like that they're going to keep the Senate. And I just wanted to ask you about that spending. I mean, do you think this was a matter of the Democrats just getting too ambitious and putting it into races they couldn't win, or not spending in the right way, or is there a point at which extra money just doesn't really have any effect?
I really do think that the Democrat Party is becoming the party of Hollywood, big tech, and Wall Street, and as a consequence, they miss the big picture. And the big picture is who connects with the hearts and minds and interests of the vast majority of Americans. That's why Donald Trump is now in this fight for the real conscience of this nation, because he spoke directly to them, even being outspent. That connection, I think the Democrat Party in Hollywood and big tech they're missing. That's they can spend their money wildly if they want to. I hope they continue to do it. There has to be that connection with the working people, men and women of America, and Donald Trump found that connection. That was, in fact, we witnessed that in the results of this past November 3rd.
One of the unreported stories of this campaign is that all my life, the liberals have had a particularly strong ground game, not so much the conservatives, the Republicans, but that's changed under Donald Trump. We have a grassroots and we have organizations out there that are engaged in a way that I've never seen it before. So the conservatives at the grassroots level were on fire. We saw that, as Ken pointed out, with the Trump rallies. So the left has not experienced having a conservative grassroots ground game like they have seen the last couple of years. Grover?
The best way to kill a bad product is to advertise it heavily. And one of the challenges is that what the Democrats are trying to sell doesn't help. So if you spend the money selling higher energy prices and less production of energy and higher taxes for you and so on, that won't do well. But what they have spent money on, and I think they probably did win a bunch of races that they wouldn't have won otherwise, is they run ads just saying he's a swell guy, or run ads trashing the Republicans. So I think money does matter. It doesn't overcome everything, or the Republicans wouldn't have many seats in the House or Senate this year.
Anybody else care to weigh in? Let me add one more comment. One of the most famous cliches in politics is all politics is local, and that allegedly came from Tip O'Neill. Nonsense. That's what liberals want us to believe, because liberals, as a general rule, cannot run on their issues. They can't run, as Grover says, on higher taxes, open borders, less national security, weaker election laws, and they are a deliverer of services. You want a pothole fixed, I'm your person. You need a bridge, talk to me. You're not getting your Social Security check, I'll take care of that. They like local issues because they are afraid of national issues. And whenever Republicans nationalize the elections, as Donald Trump did heavily in the last couple of weeks of his campaign here, Republicans do very well. And the Democrats are afraid of national issues. They invariably do very poorly when the issues are focused nationally. All right, if there are no more comments, next question.
All right, Mark Tapscott had a question. So Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate it. My question is, do you all think the Democrats consciously planned before the election to do things beginning election day to steal it? And I have a follow-up to that.
Yeah.
Who wants to handle that?
I mean, clear.
Jenny Beth, are you there? You have any thoughts?
I'll yield to Jenny Beth. That was her.
That was not me.
Oh, I mean, clearly, some of these late in the game rule changes were designed in their favor with regards to extending the day the ballots were collected, expanding the mode of ballot submission, mail-in, etc. Clearly, they've had it for years. They've had an end game these things. I mean, I think we're seeing it play out right now. These elections become muddier and muddier the more modes of submission, vote submission, Democrats are able to squeeze through in these different states. So it's was it a plan? Sure. Did they have 2020 in mind? Probably. I mean, did that accelerate because they can't stand Trump? Absolutely. Would I use the word steal? I mean, I think it goes without saying.
Do I believe that there was a deliberate, well-orchestrated attempt to suppress the Trump vote by depressing Trump supporters into believing that their activity was fruitless? Yes, I do. Whether it was this notion that Trump was going to lose a particular area by 17 points, that he was trailing dramatically, that there was going to be a red mirage that didn't reflect the disgust with Trump. Yeah, I think this was well thought out. Do I think there are Democrat strongholds that have a history of measurable corruption? Yes. So look, I think what caught them off guard was the breakthrough of the Trump supporters, that this exploded their myths about turnout, and so they couldn't manage the turnout through perpetuating theories and stories of fear, but their backup plan was to, in fact, do what they're doing. That's to manufacture votes, to think that we would go to sleep and roll over and accept results that just didn't make sense, whether it's in Arizona or where they found 138,000 votes in the dark of night, and not one of those votes or ballots was for Trump.
Just playing off what Ken said, warfare has many ways to be engaged in. There's psychological warfare. There's, the media saying there's a 95% chance that Joe Biden is going to win the presidency. Polls that showing Biden with a 17-point lead in states that he either tied or we see the demonstrations in the streets. Nobody is afraid of rioters and demonstrators and violence from Republicans. It's the Democrats, the psychological warfare. And we know, as Ken said, it's Democrat strongholds that have the history going back 100+ years of corruption and illegal activities. It's a fact that of all the subgroups in the country that have the most fear, the most concerned about fraudulent balloting is African Americans, because they see it firsthand in their community. They know it. We don't see it, many of us here, but the African Americans who feel more than any other subgroup out there that there's illegal activities going on in balloting, because they see it firsthand in their communities.
My follow-up question then for you guys is, given all these things, observations that you've made, are there measures that the Trump campaign or the groups in the conservative movement supporting the Trump campaign should have done to prepare for what's been happening since the election day, but weren't done?
Well, let me tell you, this campaign not only had a great ground game, they in fact went out and recruited folks to work the polls. There's evidence after evidence that there were volunteers who were intimidated at in some of these strongholds. So do I think that they did everything perfectly? Probably not. Did I see a tremendous increase in activity and effort and some things that go unattended in places that go unattended? Yes. The Trump team did a great job, and that's why they exploded the myths of the great blue wave. You know, if you just stop to think about it, it's because they in fact had a ground game, as Richard has indicated, and two, now they have witnesses that are watching the process and reporting it, and as Jenny Beth has done, just opening up this press conference.
Yeah, I'll just add to Ken real quick. Look, I think the campaign doesn't necessarily need to brief us on their preparedness or their plan, okay? And if they were, I'd be pretty upset. I want them executing their plan. I know they have a plan that they're executing in real time, and we can see it all on our phones play out. As far as the movement is concerned, you've seen rallies pop up, especially today, and it's going to continue through the weekend, on a dime, on a moment's notice. Hundreds of people across the country in various cities, some of which I'd like to be at right now. And then when it comes to legal organizations within the cause, those guys are contributing their time in real time, and we're prepared, and we're asked to be on standby at the ready as this unfolded, beginning Tuesday night. So everyone's working in consort with one another, and it's going to be a full frontal from the campaign and all the groups that supported him along the way.
Brother Tapscott, let me just close my comment on that with a quote from the great Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist. Frederick Douglass said, "Those who are whooped easiest are whooped most often." We're not going to be whooped on this.
Brother Ken, I hope you're right.
Let me make a comment, a general comment, that the left is being very critical in recent years about how the conservatives are doing this and that, and they're not acting like traditional Republicans who did 50, 60 years ago. They were very accommodating and they worked across the aisle. And that's because people who started coming along in the 1970s and 1980s began to push back. And there's an old saying that the person who starts a fight is the second person. The first person is pushing, that's not a fight. Now conservatives are engaged in a way that the left is unfamiliar with. They never come up against serious, active conservatives like President Donald Trump and the others all around us in the House and the Senate and the conservative organizations at the national, state, and local level. The left hasn't seen this type of opposition before, but they better get used to it, because we feel that America hangs in the balance based on this election and the next few elections, and we're fully engaged. We're here, and we're going to do everything we can to save our constitutional republic.
All right.
Next question.
Excuse me. Wichiro Kakutani from the Washington Free Beacon has a question, so the floor is yours.
Hi, this is UT. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
Great. Hi. So just a question. So obviously, it appears like a Biden victory is more likely than not. But on the other hand, the Democrats expected a really good night in terms of their congressional prospects as well. They thought they were going to retake the Senate. They certainly thought they were going to win at least 5 to 15 seats in the House. Obviously, their Senate prospects are quite limited, and in the House, it seems like Republicans are going to be the one who's going to capture seats. So why do you think so many voters put their tickets and voted against Trump, but at the same time supported the Republican Party at the lower ballot? And what sort of message does that send for the mandate for the next year?
Yeah.
Grover, that sounds like a question.
Yeah, I don't know how many people split ballots. You really have to look at that district by district. On some of these Senate races, the president's been ahead. Some of them he's run behind him. You'd like to think if you've got a senator running, Susan Collins, she's known everybody in Maine for several decades. And so she got an absolute majority in a state that the president was not able to carry. I mean, but she knew and worked the state. A senator should run ahead of a presidential candidate. And so frankly, should a House candidate if they're walking their district, because they can do that and the president can't. But I don't know that the premise is correct that there's been some big gap between, I mean, you think of a particular state where some senator ran way ahead of the president. Susan Collins, yes.
Yeah, all we're talking about here, I mean, the gaps you're referring to exist in the states that are being contested right now. So, I mean, I don't even want to comment on that, on the speculative. I think it's just pure speculation that certain ballots were, the top line was filled out and nothing else was filled out. Until the count can be transparently ensured, we're just guessing.
And one of the
polls may have been flawed, but when the president's polls got better, everybody else's polls got better. When the president's polls got worse, everybody else's polls got worse. So the fact that he kept it this close brought everybody else to the finish line as well. So there's, I guess you could always say he could have done more or better, but he did pretty well to get us progress in the House and the Senate.
Yeah, and again, this is my third election, highly contested election in the last 20 years, as I mentioned in my opening comment. One of the things that, as I've tracked this, that has been unlike any of the past, is that this president had a lot of Democrats, and this is what the left didn't measure. He had a lot of Democrats who hadn't changed their registration. And so, they got counted as Democrats that had voted. What they missed was that there were Democrats that had voted that crossed over and voted for the president. This president, if you go back and look at the ballots, this president didn't trail a lot of these folks. The gap between them and him happened to be driven by the fact that he had a lot of crossover.
All right, thank you, Ken. Next question.
We have some time for a couple more questions. So for anybody who's just now joining, in case you missed the beginning of the press conference, if you'd like to ask a question, you can either use the raise hand function in the Zoom app, or else notify me in the chat. All right. I see a Tim who has his hand raised. So Tim, I'm going to unmute you, or you're already muted. So please identify who you're with, what outlet you're with, and then feel free to ask your question.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for doing this. This is Tim Alberta with Politico. Ken, I got a question for you, man. So you just got done saying a minute ago that the Trump campaign was really well organized, not just in terms of their field operations and their ground game, but in terms of their sort of legal prep and their attentiveness on the ground to the count itself. Which is the same thing I've heard from Republican county chairs across the country over the last 6 months, that they're on this like white on rice, that there's a level of oversight and scrutiny on the ballot collection process from start to finish that there's never been before. And yet, in the same breath, I'm hearing a lot of you also talk about a lack of transparency and a lack of access. And I'm really struggling to reconcile these two things. So help me understand.
Well, Tim, I'm talking about the vote count. Look, one of the staples of our bipartisan system is that you have bipartisan eyeballs on every aspect of the process. And when you all of a sudden, one set of partisan eyes are cut out of the process, you in fact then start to destroy the integrity of the bipartisan system. So the question becomes, are there tangible evidences, sets of evidence that show where transparency has been blocked at a particular station of the process And the answer to that is yes. You know, since election day, there's evidence after evidence after evidence that people have been blocked. I mean, when you start having election observers given binoculars to try to eyeball the ballots and what's going on, that's a problem. When we don't know in Arizona, in those counties where folks who had their ballots soiled with a Sharpie where the machine couldn't pick it up, you know, where are those ballots? How many of them are there? Were they made to be provisional? How many of them were discarded? Those are legitimate questions of transparency, bipartisan transparency. When you in fact have folks putting up paper across windows to cut off observation, that happens in the minute, on the spot, and that's documented. So that's what I'm talking about.
Anybody else?
Well, I mean, the question was for Ken, but I'll double down. I mean, Tim, both assertions are true. They were prepared. That they were there on a moment's notice, and they were there from the beginning. And the thrust of the legal procedure, the proceedings, is centered around the fact that they were blocked. So it's both. But in order to reconcile, you just have to concede that both are true. The campaign was well prepared for this moment.
I think it's a reporter.
But they haven't been able to count the ongoing vote, so they want it stopped, and we support that. We support that effort.
So Ken, you were a Sec State. You know this better than most. The parties locally, they clear their numbers and their personnel as far as poll watchers in advance. They don't just let random people in off the street, Democrat or Republican, and demand to start seeing ballots. But in most of these jurisdictions that are counting, like in Detroit, which a couple of you have mentioned, they had poll watchers for the Republican Party cleared in advance who were in there and who were watching. So give me some examples of where they're being denied access. I can't hear you, Ken. Sorry.
Yeah. Ken, can you unmute your mic?
Tim, let's go be real about this. AP has this capacity. You have this capacity. Go to the county chairman in those respective states and ask them for the concrete evidence. That's all you have. That is the journalism that I'm asking you to do.
Well, Ken, I have, respectfully, Ken, I have. I've been on the phone with county chairman in PA, Michigan, Wisconsin the last couple of days.
And they haven't given you any evidence?
No, not yet. That's why I'm asking you. I feel like you guys know something I don't hear.
Well, let's go out to Arizona, and what you're telling me is that you can't get confirmation that there were in some Republican areas there were actually, or in some voting precincts, ballots that were spoiled because Sharpies had been distributed for the balloting process. You're saying that from what you can tell, that was made up out of whole cloth?
From what I can tell, the Maricopa County elections director, who's nonpartisan, has said that that's not accurate, that the ballots were being read regardless of what they were filled out with. And if the ballots were rejected because they had been filled out with the wrong instrument, that would have been known immediately when they were trying to be processed. Those ballots wouldn't have just been thrown out. But he said.
And so let me go back, Tim, because what the question was were those ballots, and I'm saying this from Ohio and my experience. The question was, were those ballots discarded or were they put aside to be counted as provisional and be hand counted as opposed to counted in the machine?
That I don't know, Ken. What I'm asking you.
But that's my point. You should be able to know that. That's the question you asked that administrator out there. Were those ballots that couldn't be read by the machine, were they put aside to be hand counted at a later time? If they can't answer that question, then the concern that the Republicans have, the Trump team has, are legitimate concerns.
Okay, I'm still looking for individual examples. The Arizona one seems like it's been resolved from Maricopa County, but I've heard talk on this call of a stolen election, of irregularities, of potential fraud, and I'm still looking for concrete examples.
Tim, did the papering up of the windows, the block? Are you telling me that in your investigation that didn't happen?
Where are you referring to exactly with the paper?
In Atlanta. Are you telling me where? But it's all over the internet. Where in fact you can see it. There's video where they have papered the windows and blocked the vision of observers. Are you telling me that didn't happen?
I haven't seen it. I don't know.
I'm saying, well, then go to Atlanta. There's an example. There's an example that's very clear.
But Ken, you're taking something that you saw on the internet, and you're certain that those windows being blocked, that they're not trying to block.
Yes, I'm 100% certain, because I have talked to the Republicans there.
Okay, then that's what I'm asking for. If you're certain of that, then that's an example. That's all I'm asking for here.
Okay,
You guys have been giving a lot of vagaries on these things, not Richard Viguerie. I want specific examples of what you're talking about.
Yeah, Tim, Grinnell just had a press conference an hour ago. They filed suit in Vegas because the Republicans tried to get in to count, and they couldn't get in. I mean, are they right? I don't know. I'm not in Vegas, but that's an example of a suit that was filed within the last hour on that issue.
If I may point something out, I published earlier today at the Epoch Times a document that we obtained that was filed in a court in Maricopa County this morning by a poll worker who described in great detail exactly how the Sharpie problem prevented people's votes from being counted.
Yeah, these things are not being made up out of whole cloth. And the brilliance of our system is that we have local management and administration of elections. And so that administration has more integrity when there are prime examples of true bipartisanship in terms of keeping up in the chain of custody of the ballots, and two, that there has been some verification that those folks who are claimed to, who have registered or who have cast a ballot, are who they claim to be. And there within is going to be, Tim, a lot of the question as to whether or not votes that are being counted have been verified. And if in fact signatures didn't match up, but they went on and counted them, that's the question. Was there bipartisan sign off, or were those contested ballots put aside for further verification? Those are the questions that as a journalist, I'm sure you're asking at the local level.
The windows being covered up was on Fox television yesterday. They covered it. Why don't we move on to the next question now? Another question?
All right, everybody, just real quick, I think we have time for maybe one more question with our panelists here. Just for anybody who has joined us in the last few minutes, I'll remind everybody, if you could just identify what outlet you're with, and also if you could put that down in the chat as well. And with that, does anybody have a final question? Like I say, we have time for one more.
I'd like to ask Richard, you mentioned earlier about Republicans winning elections when they nationalize them. Do you think the Trump campaign nationalized this one too late?
Absolutely. And in a sense, Mark, they didn't really nationalize it in a good marketing sense, so to speak. There's an old feeling about politics that you need to give the voters a tune they can whistle. And Reagan in 1976, 1980 gave voters just two tunes to whistle. One, communism is evil and we're going to defeat communism. Second, government is not the solution, it is the problem. Government governs too much, taxes too much, spends too much, regulates too much. And that was a tune the voters could whistle, so to speak. So much of, if not almost everything that Reagan talked about, fit into those two dynamics right there. And the president, God bless him, was all over the ballpark. He was talking, 20, 30, 40 different issues. And if he had nationalized the election around the tune that this is a choice election, we're going to go hard left to the socialist, and he talked about America has never, been socialist, not going to be socialist, but he didn't stay with that tune, making this a choice election. We're going to stay to traditional American values or go hard left and change the laws in America so that it'll be very difficult for any competition to ever throw them out of office. So he began to focus on the last weeks of the campaign, but it wasn't structured and organized in an efficient and effective way, in my opinion.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, if there are no more questions, we thank everybody and stay tuned. Fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be we're going to go very, very fast here. And there is a civil war, which we all need to realize between the left and the right. And these might be the good old days in just a few years here, because it's going to get really serious soon. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, Tim, I'm counting on you to light your candle, not hide it under a bushel, and punch holes in the darkness.
All right, everybody. Good call. Thank y'all.
All right.
Keep that.
Is there anybody left in there?